The pizza box was still warm in Corey Mitchell's hands when the masked gunman emerged from the overgrown lawn across the street. What should have been an ordinary Saturday evening in May 2010 became a nightmare of gunfire and terror, as the 34-year-old single father and his 11-year-old twins found themselves running for their lives through their own Dayton neighborhood. The brazen execution that followed would leave investigators grappling with a web of threatening text messages, suspicious ex-girlfriends, and potential accomplices, while a killer remained free more than a decade later. Corey Mitchell had just returned home with his twins, Aisha and Dawn, after running errands on that sweltering late spring evening of May 29, 2010. The family parked their car in their usual spot directly across from their residence, in front of an abandoned house on their quiet Dayton street. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to head inside to enjoy their evening meal, their normal routine was shattered by violence. A masked figure materialized from the tall grass surrounding the vacant property, brandishing a firearm and immediately firing a single shot. Corey screamed for his children to run, as the gunman called out a chilling recognition that would haunt the survivors forever. The attacker knew Corey by his street nickname, making it immediately clear that this was no random crime. The gunman then began firing wildly at the fleeing family, striking young Aisha in the leg and sending her tumbling to the pavement in agony. As Aisha lay wounded and helpless, she watched in horror as the masked shooter turned his full attention to her father. Multiple bullets struck Corey in his arms and legs, bringing him down in the street. The gunman then approached the fallen man and, standing directly over him in execution style, fired several more rounds into his body. After unleashing a devastating barrage of gunfire, the killer fled on foot while neighbors rushed to call police and provide assistance to the victims. The first officer to reach the scene found Corey somehow still clinging to life, despite massive blood loss and severe breathing difficulties. When asked who had shot him, Corey could only respond that he didn't know. Repeated attempts to elicit a description of his attacker or any information about potential enemies yielded the same response. As emergency medical personnel loaded the critically wounded man into an ambulance, they discovered their second victim when they heard screaming behind them. Aisha had been shot below her left knee but was conscious and able to provide crucial details about their attacker. Working with both children, authorities obtained a detailed description of the gunman. The twins described him as a black male approximately their father's size and weight, wearing a mask that covered his face but not his head, revealing that he was bald. His clothing consisted of a white long-sleeve t-shirt, black pants, black boots, and black gloves. The specificity of their account, combined with the shooter's use of Corey's nickname, convinced investigators that this was a targeted assassination rather than a random attack. Corey succumbed to his injuries shortly after arriving at the hospital, officially transforming the case from aggravated assault to homicide. Crime scene technicians immediately began processing the area and recovered two significant pieces of evidence: numerous shell casings scattered throughout the scene, and a tea bottle discovered in the grass of the abandoned house. The bottle was submitted for DNA testing while the shell casings were entered into the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, though neither yielded immediate results. Neighborhood canvassing proved largely fruitless, with only one resident willing to speak with investigators. This witness had heard multiple gunshots and came outside to check on her 7-year-old daughter, who reported that someone had been shot. Initially dismissing her child's account as imagination, the woman quickly realized the truth when she observed a man lying in the street and a young girl crying hysterically. Her assistance to Aisha represented the only civilian aid provided during the immediate aftermath. The targeted nature of the attack became even more apparent when investigators examined recent police reports involving Corey. Just 3 weeks before his murder, on May 8, Corey had been the victim of an attempted robbery. Two suspects had approached him as he prepared to enter his vehicle, pulling him from the car and throwing him to the ground. One attacker had pointed a gun at him while declaring their intention to enter his residence. Corey managed to roll away from his truck toward the sidewalk, as the suspects fired 1 or 2 shots in his direction before fleeing on foot. During the investigation of that earlier incident, responding officers had asked Corey about potential enemies or ongoing conflicts. He mentioned problems with an ex-girlfriend who had previously broken windows in his car, though no follow-up investigation appears to have been conducted regarding this individual. The case remained unsolved, and investigators found no shell casings at the scene, possibly indicating the use of a revolver or inadequate evidence collection. Even more disturbing was a second incident that occurred just 1 week before Corey's murder. On May 15, he contacted police to report receiving threatening text messages from a specific phone number. The messages contained vague death threats, expressing hope that he had no children and promising that the sender would be seeing him soon. Despite the ominous nature of these communications, which occurred just 2 weeks before his execution-style killing, no follow-up investigation was conducted. The threatening message incident was documented as a memo rather than an official crime report, which typically requires more thorough investigation and follow-up procedures. Detective Nathan By later acknowledged that the threats should have warranted a formal crime report for menacing charges, but the opportunity for immediate investigation had been lost. The significance of these messages became apparent only after Corey's death, when investigators recognized they likely came from his killer. Investigators immediately sought phone records for the number associated with the threatening text, though the process proved time-consuming given the technology limitations of 2010. Meanwhile, Corey's family struggled to process their devastating loss. His mother, Carol, who lived approximately 1 hour away, found herself replaying their final conversation, which had occurred shortly after the attempted robbery incident. During that call, Corey had ominously told her that if anything happened to him, he knew she would take care of his children. Carol had hoped never to face such a scenario, but she now found herself caring for Aisha and Dawn while trying to fill the enormous void left by her son's death. 6 days after the shooting, the family gathered to lay Corey to rest at his funeral service. It was there that an unexpected development occurred when a mysterious young woman approached Carol with startling claims. The woman, who appeared to be approximately 19 or 20 years old, approached Carol during the funeral service and handed her a piece of paper. She introduced herself as Brandy and claimed to know everything that had happened on the day of the murder, asking Carol to contact her. By the time Carol fully processed the encounter, the young woman had disappeared. Family members who witnessed the interaction confirmed seeing Brandy break down crying outside the funeral home, sobbing uncontrollably as the family departed for the cemetery. Carol immediately provided Brandy's contact information to police, but when investigators attempted to call the number, they discovered it was no longer in service. This frustrating dead end represented just one of many leads that would emerge as the investigation intensified and community members began providing information about potential suspects and motives. The ex-girlfriend Corey had mentioned after the attempted robbery began receiving significant attention from multiple sources who suggested she warranted investigation. This woman, whom authorities refer to as Danielle, had dated Corey for approximately 2 to 2.5 years before their relationship ended just months before his murder. Carol and other family members expressed strong suspicions about Danielle, noting that she had behaved erratically during their relationship, including stealing Corey's house keys to make unauthorized copies that allowed her to visit his home. Unannounced, family members reported that whenever they witnessed Corey in telephone arguments, the conflicts invariably involved Danielle. The children confirmed that their father had been arguing with Danielle by phone throughout the day of his murder, though the specific subject of their disputes remained unclear. Given that their breakup had occurred just 3 or 4 months earlier, investigators assumed the arguments related to their recent separation. When police located Danielle and requested an interview, she provided details about her final contact with Corey on the day of his death. She claimed to have called him around 5 p.m., during which he mentioned getting a haircut before ending the conversation. Danielle acknowledged awareness of the threatening text messages Corey had received, but claimed he hadn't shared details about the threats or expressed concerns about his safety. She described their post-breakup relationship as a friends with benefits arrangement and denied any involvement in or knowledge of his murder. When asked how she learned about the shooting, Danielle's response raised immediate red flags. She explained that her daughter's friend had called to report police presence at Corey's house, prompting her to leave a party in Jefferson Township and drive to the scene with her friend and brother. This account contradicted information from Corey's relatives, who reported that Danielle had claimed to be out of town on the day of the murder. Investigators questioned Danielle about the threatening texts Corey had received, and while she acknowledged knowing about them, she claimed to be unable to recall specific content. However, she clearly remembered receiving her own suspicious message approximately 3 months earlier, around the time of their breakup. According to Danielle, this message warned her to stay away from Corey or face consequences, though she claimed not to know the sender and no longer possessed the message or phone number. Police arranged for Danielle to return for a polygraph examination, which she agreed to undergo. However, by this time, investigators had traced the threatening messages sent to Corey to an individual known by the nickname Mook. More significantly, they discovered that Mook's phone number appeared in Danielle's call records, creating a direct connection between her and the source of the death threats. When Danielle returned for her scheduled polygraph, investigators confronted her about Mook and the calls from his number. Initially, she denied knowing anyone by that name, but when pressed about the phone contact, she eventually admitted to knowing Mook and receiving a call from his number on the day of Corey's murder. However, she claimed the caller wasn't Mook himself, but rather a mutual friend referred to as Lee. According to Danielle, Lee, Mook, and her brother were all close friends, making her familiar with both men. She revealed that she had encountered Lee on the day of the murder at a ball game, where he had approached her on a motorized scooter and asked suspicious questions about Corey. Specifically, Lee had inquired whether Corey owned a gun, where he kept it, and how much money he possessed. At the time, Danielle claimed to think nothing of these questions, but in retrospect, she believed Lee was planning to rob Corey. Danielle further revealed that Lee had called her using Mook's phone after the shooting, asking if she had seen the news about Corey's death. During a subsequent call, Lee allegedly told her he was finished, which she interpreted as a confession to the crime. Despite providing this information, Danielle continued to deny setting anything in motion or having advanced knowledge that Corey would be harmed. Strangely, despite Danielle's appearance for a scheduled polygraph examination and the significant new information she provided during questioning, no polygraph was actually administered. Documentation from that day simply notes no polygraph without explanation. Detective expressed confusion about this decision, noting that polygraph examiner Detective Elizabeth Alley indicated she had seen examinations canceled due to medical issues or subject refusal, but neither appeared to be the case with Danielle. Following Danielle's interview, investigators' attention shifted to Mook and especially to Lee, whose involvement seemed increasingly likely based on Danielle's account. Their suspicions intensified dramatically when they examined text messages Danielle had sent to Lee's phone number on 3 specific dates. On May 15th, the same day Corey received threatening messages from Mook's phone, Danielle had texted Lee expressing her desire for him to kill Corey using a racial slur. 3 days later, on May 18th, she sent another message to Lee's number repeating the word kill multiple times, followed by a derogatory term. On May 24th, just 5 days before the murder, Danielle texted Lee again, using another racial slur and adding that she had recently acquired additional money, which investigators interpreted as a potential payment offer for carrying out the killing. Armed with this evidence, investigators made interviewing Lee their immediate priority. Fortunately, he proved easy to locate, as he was already incarcerated on charges of kidnapping and aggravated robbery involving a firearm. The timing was particularly notable, as Lee's arrest on June 23, 2010, occurred less than a month after Corey's murder. When investigators met with Lee at the county jail, he initially cooperated by providing background information and acknowledging his friendship with Danielle, whom he described as being like a sister to him. However, when questioned about Corey, Lee claimed complete ignorance, stating he had never heard of him and didn't know any specific individual by that name. The interview took a dramatic turn when investigators asked about his motorized scooter, a vehicle he was known to operate around town. When asked if he had seen anyone else riding a similar scooter or knew anyone who resembled him, Lee became visibly nervous and immediately terminated the interview, requesting an attorney. The significance of the scooter questioning remained somewhat unclear, as Detective indicated no witnesses reported seeing a scooter near the crime scene. Investigators may have been attempting to trick Lee into believing someone had spotted him or a similar individual on a scooter near the shooting location, hoping to provoke a confession or admission. Meanwhile, investigators continued pursuing Mook, who proved more difficult to locate due to his apparent homelessness. When they finally made contact and brought him to the station for questioning, Mook acknowledged that the threatening messages to Corey had come from his phone, but denied sending them personally. His explanation involved a complex scenario at a party attended by multiple people, including Danielle, her brother, and Mook's daughter Polly. According to Mook, during the social gathering, he had set his phone down and stepped away. During his absence, Danielle allegedly instructed Polly to take the phone and send the threatening messages to Corey. Mook claimed that Polly's mother had later confirmed this account, with Polly admitting to sending the messages at Danielle's direction. When investigators attempted to verify this story by speaking with Polly, Her mother reported having no current contact with her daughter, effectively ending that line of inquiry. As the investigation continued to center on Lee and Danielle, additional evidence emerged supporting Lee's involvement. Phone records revealed that Lee had actually called Corey's number on the day of the murder, directly contradicting his claims of not knowing the victim. This discovery eliminated any remaining doubt about Lee's false statements during his police interview. Investigators sought to obtain DNA evidence from Lee to compare with the tea bottle found at the crime scene, but testing proved inconclusive due to insufficient genetic material on the bottle. Despite their strong suspicions about Lee's role as the actual shooter, investigators lacked the physical evidence necessary to build a solid case against him. However, they believed they had sufficient evidence to charge Danielle with complicity in the homicide based on her threatening text messages and apparent coordination with Lee. That winter, investigators visited Danielle at her workplace for another interview, during which she corroborated Mook's account about instructing Polly to send the threatening messages using his phone. She also admitted to being angry with Corey for his relationships with other women. On January 10th, Danielle was arrested on preliminary charges of complicity, essentially alleging that she aided and abetted in Corey's murder. Following her arrest, she finally acknowledged sending the threatening messages to Lee, admitting her anger and stating her belief that Lee had killed Corey and that her actions were responsible for setting events in motion. Despite Danielle's admissions, prosecutors recognized the challenges inherent in pursuing complicity charges when only one person was being charged. Complicity typically requires charging multiple defendants, as it involves assisting others in committing crimes. When the case was presented to a grand jury, they declined to indict Danielle, and she was released with all charges expunged from her record. The grand jury's decision marked the last significant movement in the case, effectively ending prosecution efforts, despite the substantial evidence gathered against both Danielle and Lee. While the decision frustrated investigators and Corey's family, the legal system's requirements for multiple defendants in complicity charges created an insurmountable obstacle when only one suspect could be definitively connected to the crime. In the years since the grand jury decision, investigators and family members have worked to keep Corey's murder in the public consciousness through media campaigns and billboard advertisements throughout Dayton. However, these efforts have generated few meaningful leads or new information. The detective maintains that the department retains all evidence from the case, including the tea bottle from the crime scene, and hopes that advancing DNA technology may eventually yield better results from the physical evidence. Several individuals remain of interest to investigators, including Brandy, the mysterious woman who approached Carol at Corey's funeral, and Polly, who allegedly sent the threatening messages to Corey at Danielle's direction. The Dayton Police Department continues to welcome any information related to the case, regardless of how insignificant it might seem, recognizing that even small details can sometimes provide crucial missing pieces in complex investigations. Corey's mother, Carol, has channeled her grief into advocacy work, becoming active in parents of murdered children and moms against violence, while connecting with other advocates across Ohio to fight for justice in similar cases. Her transformation of personal tragedy into public service demonstrates the enduring impact of violent crime on families and communities. More than 13 years after that fatal Saturday evening, Corey Mitchell's execution-style murder remains unsolved, leaving his family without closure and his killer free. The case stands as a stark reminder of how domestic disputes and personal vendettas can escalate into deadly violence, while also highlighting the complex challenges investigators face when building cases against multiple suspects with varying degrees of involvement. Despite the passage of time, law enforcement officials remain committed to pursuing justice for Corey and his children, hoping that new evidence or witness testimony might finally provide the breakthrough needed to hold his killer accountable for this brazen act of violence in broad daylight.